AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Lots going on. Busy weekend. I don't know what to call her other than she is the gift that keeps on giving. I want you to listen to... On CBS's Face the Nation, listen to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decrying about the fact that Congress is 80% male.
Last week on this program, we had the man you defeated, the New York Congressman Joe Crowley, and he congratulated you on your win. He said you very much deserved it. He also explained two factors he thought that were decisive here, one of them being the year of the woman, he called it, and also the timing of the primary. Are those factors in your view?
Well, I think that the factors that ultimately created our win was the fact that we had bold commitments, and I campaigned on hard commitments of Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, ensuring a Green New Deal for our future, and championing those issues were the reason that we won. We won across demographics. We won. We expanded the electorate ourselves. We did the work of organizing.
So you reject the idea that your gender was a factor here?
I think that, I think that in this moment, there's a confluence of factors that makes this moment inspiring. Right now, more women than ever are running for office, and I do think that women want representation in Congress, absolutely. Congress right now is 80% male, and that creates blind spots in our legislation. It means we don't have family leave. We don't have paid maternal and parental leave. It means that we don't get the equal pay that we want. So I think those issues certainly were important.
Well, right now there is a female leader within the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi. If you were lucky enough to win in November and come here to Washington, will you support her?
I need to get to Congress first. I need to work on winning my general election. But
you don't see
I'm
her as
excited
the party
to,
leader?
I mean, she's the current party leader, absolutely. And I look forward to be part of that conversation and winning back the House. There is no decision about the party leader until we win the House first.
So you are leaving open the possibility you may endorse her if you win in November?
Yeah.
There's so much wrong with that. What does she mean by we don't have paid family leave and we don't have parental family leave? I mean, I'm not sure what she's talking about, because I know a lot of companies. Is she looking to federally legislate and force the private sector to provide paid family leave? Is that what she's after? But I mean, every time she says something, and she talks about dominating different sectors of her constituency from a voting perspective, failing to at least acknowledge that there was a 13% turnout. Okay, so like 74 people voted, and she won. So, I mean, I don't know. I want her to keep talking and keep speaking, because every time she does, I keep saying every time she does, it's another conservative voter born. It's just mind-boggling to me. And I asked this last week on Twitter, but I keep asking the question, how can you make people safer by getting rid of the law enforcement agency that is paid to protect them? Listen to Kevin McCarthy on Leftist talking about the Democrats' new push and how the Democrats have become very much the Socialist Democratic Party.
Last week, Democrats introduced a bill to abolish ICE. That's the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. In doing so, I think we should first review the agency's record. As it turns out, ICE agents are on the front lines in the battle against crime. In 2016, they arrested nearly 2,000 human traffickers, criminals who are involved in modern-day slavery. You wanted to abolish that. Last year, they arrested more than 4,800 gang members, including more than 800 members of the MS-13, one of the most vicious gangs operating today. But you wanted to abolish that and put it into our communities. And they intercepted more than 1 ton of fentanyl that was headed for our communities. Now, we all should know what fentanyl will do, because we just debated more than 50-some bills on this floor because 172 people who are Americans will die today because of an addiction. Fentanyl is so deadly that just a few grams will kill you. But you wanted to abolish that, to allow it in to our communities. Still, the Democrats say, not only will they want to introduce it, people will co-sponsor it. But there's a problem, and I actually think there are 2 problems with this. The first problem is most Americans disagree with you. They actually support ICE. According to a recent poll, just 1 in 4 Americans think we should abolish it. The second problem is Democrats don't even agree with their own bill they introduce. They lack the courage of their so-called convictions. Because when we offered the ability to bring the bill up, abolish ICE, that they put into the hopper and co-sponsored, Democrats said they would vote no. They wanted the glory of introducing a bill to the far left of their own party, but they didn't have the guts to accept the consequences. That's the kind of leadership that the Democrats have to offer.
Did you catch that? They wanted to introduce a bill. They did want to introduce a bill to abolish ICE and then voted against it. Are they that stupid? Well, no, I'm sorry. They are that stupid. And I keep listening to everybody on the left talk about socialism, but you know what? Ask a liberal what a progressive is. Ask a liberal what socialism actually means, and they can't tell you. They don't have the first clue what socialism is or does or how it works. They just see a big world where everybody's supposed to be equal and no one's supposed to get ahead and everybody's supposed to have what everybody else has. And it's funny. It's sad, but it's funny. And you heard him talk about it, right? 1 in 4 Americans, only 1 in 4 Americans wants to abolish ICE. First off, where the hell's the 1 in 4? Like, on what planet does abolishing ICE make sense to anybody in this country? How do you help and protect people by abolishing law enforcement? Anyway, we're all over the map, different stuff. There was so much that happened this weekend. Listen to Mike Pompeo talk about that President Trump has invited President Putin to the White House for another meeting, which, I don't know, liberals still somehow see that as treason. How can you argue against the leaders of pretty much the only 2 legit nuclear powers on the planet sitting down to discuss things and possibly find a means to an end? Listen to Mike Pompeo talk about the invite.
Why is it a good idea for the president to invite Vladimir Putin to the White House? What does the U.S. have to gain from that visit?
Yeah, I'm happy that the 2 leaders of 2 very important countries are continuing to meet. And if that meeting takes place in Washington, I think it's all to the good. Those conversations are incredibly important. We have our senior leaders meeting all across the world with people that we have deep disagreements with. It is incredibly valuable to the people of the United States of America that President Putin and President Trump continue to engage in dialogue to resolve the difficult issues that our countries face between each other. I think this makes enormous sense, and I'm very hopeful that meeting will take place this fall.
Okay, what part of that doesn't make sense? What part of that is treasonous? They literally would like to have this meeting with Pelosi in the room and Schumer. Talk about a meeting going to hell in a handbasket fast. Make that happen. And here's why. Listen to New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman on CNN the other day. Listen to what her idea about why Trump is who he is and what he does. Listen to what her explanation of this.
The only thing that I would say has changed about the Trump White House is how Trump is approaching the job, which is that last year, in 2017, when he was aware of being in over his head, I think, and every president, to be fair, comes in feeling that way. But
I would too.
But
I think anyone would.
But obviously,
Yeah.
he ran not as a technocrat who had a lot of government experience. He was more easily swayed by advisors, more easily put in one direction or another. And now, sometime around the turn of the new year, you could feel really him feeling more emboldened, more understanding of what the job was, sort of some level of I've got this now. And that is what has changed, and that's not small.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but I sometimes get the impression that you're trying to say to viewers and readers, don't be surprised anymore. This is exactly what we would expect from Trump.
Right, which is not to say, I think that people draw the illogical conclusion from that what I'm saying is just accept this and be fine, because that is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that constantly being surprised or saying to yourself, why would he do this? Or looking for some deeper motive behind everything. I mean, I'll give you for instance, he gave this interview to The Sun, the British tabloid, notorious British tabloid, during his UK swing last week or whenever that was. Now it feels
you
like
said
it's 8
it was
years
kind of
ago.
a favor to Rupert Murdoch.
It was a favor to Rupert
his
Murdoch.
friend.
That's what he told people. That's why he did it. And it was not because he had some pre-planned strategy about shaking things up.
Yeah, he wasn't
or
trying to go in
disrupting
there
the
and
global order. I mean, he was surprised at how his remarks were received. He didn't realize that he would be making the news that he did. He didn't realize it would have the impact that it did, being in the host country, talking about their politics. When he left the stage in Helsinki, he has said this publicly, what's the big deal? There's a lot of assuming that, I mean, Trump lies frequently or tells falsehoods frequently or stretches the truth frequently, but he also often tells the truth, which is, what's the big deal? I didn't understand what I did.
This is a guy who's done things and been things and succeeded in places that nobody else has. And he is a pragmatist. He is not a politician. He's a problem solver. And to a problem solver, well, it's one of the reasons why you see the gigantic turnover in his cabinet and in his staff. He brings people in. They don't get the job done. They get fired. And this is not like the real world. So I think there's some interpretation for him. What he thinks people are going to do, how they're going to do it, and then eventually what they actually end up doing. And those aren't always the same. But the media doesn't understand how to take him, number one. President Trump is sarcastic, and it just doesn't come across well. He's not funny. He tries to be and isn't. This is all coming to a head in the midterms. And that blue wave they were waiting for, or the liberals were waiting for, sorry to tell you, that's just not going to happen. And listen to, well, I mean, it's their own fault, but listen to, and Tucker breaks it down on Fox News, Tucker Carlson. Listen to him talk about kind of the cost of all this.
Well, we first saw this brand of extremism on college campuses where student activists demonstrated against new ideas they didn't understand or against any kind of dissent from the narrow orthodoxy of the campus left. Over time, though, their protests became physical and then dangerous. Windows smashed, fires set, people beaten and threatened with death. In the past few months, scenes like that have moved off campus into our world. The left began threatening Trump administration officials who dared to appear in public, kicking them out of restaurants and screaming at them on the street. Now they're targeting private citizens who might be sympathetic to the administration. Want to open a small business? Well, you can't do that unless you voice this week's progressive dogmas. That's a lesson corporate America learned years ago and has applied ever since. It is, of course, the very opposite of freedom. The fall elections are less than 4 months from today. Tempers will rise even higher than they are now. That is guaranteed. Something awful could easily happen. Now, right now, is the time for progressive leaders to douse the fires that they set to calm their inflamed supporters. It is vital they do that. And yet they're doing the opposite. Now they're telling their followers that the President of the United States is a Russian spy, a traitor. The penalty for treason is death. Traitors, of course, must be overthrown. The mob screams, wild with rage. Democrats are banking that that rage will get their voters to the polls in November, and they may be right. It may. It may also destroy the country.
Think about that. We saw yesterday the exposure of the FISA application process, and we found out that it was all a lie. We found out what we knew earlier, which was true, that it was a fake dossier created and committed and paid for, and all the things that go with that by all the people we thought were involved. And let's not forget this, okay? I know liberals would love to have us forget this fact. This entire thing was started because there was a belief that Trump colluded with Russia to rig the presidential election. We found out that it was actually the rigging going on was the Clinton campaign, the Obama administration, the FBI, the DOJ, other intelligence agencies, along with Fusion GPS and a Russian agent. I mean, you can't make it up. I know it sounds beyond Hollywood true, but that's the fact. The fact was this investigation was started because they had proof that Trump was conspiring with Russian agents, right? Colluding with them. Adam Schiff told us they had proof. Not only do they not have proof, they have nothing, not 1 ounce of evidence in any comment anywhere that ties President Trump to anybody in Russia. It's funny. Now Russia starts threatening our president and our country, and our president basically in Twitter says, if you don't shut up, you're going to regret it. And watch, liberals are going to go all batshit crazy again, because that's the new world is going to end story. They're irrational. They're immoral. Well, hell, just look at the amount of pedophilia stuff that came out in the last 96 hours tied to Hollywood. Michael Ian Black. Are you kidding me? We're finding out the left is exactly who we thought they were. Exactly who we thought they were. Phenomenal show today. Got retired Colonel Alan West is going to join me first, and after that, Matt Boyle from Breitbart.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place?
I called it kissing the ring because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Honor and privilege to have him so many times. Retired Colonel Alan West. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, Kurt. What's happening, my friend?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not sure where to go in the Middle East. There's so many things I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. The German intelligence report that is warning everyone that Iran is seeking WMDs as Angela Merkel tries to save the Iran nuke deal, which I don't even understand or begin to talk about. But yesterday, or in the last 48 hours, one of the leaders in Iran gave a speech to a group of I don't know who's, and basically warned President Trump. I think the saying was, "Don't mess with the tiger's tail, or you'll regret it." Whatever. Today, speaking with the U.S. has no meaning except surrender and the end of people's achievements, Mr. Trump. We are the people of dignity and guarantor of security of the waterway of the region throughout the history. Don't play with the lion's tail; you will regret it. Now, I'm gonna ask you a question. I seem to remember over the last 18 years the United States Army kicking Iran's ass across the desert and back a couple times, and I don't understand. I mean, I get the whole bring America to its knees thing because that's how tough people talk. But to do it in public when the whole world knows you've done nothing but get your ass kicked for 2 decades, seems kind of willfully ignorant to me.
Well, the thing is, Kurt, what you're looking at is an Iran that is facing immense pressures. They're facing domestic pressures with the protests that you've had. Their economy is in a free-fall collapse. And they don't have anything other to do than to make these empty rhetorical threats and hope that, it will be heeded. But there's a different president in the White House right now. And the fact that President Trump withdrew from the Iranian nuclear agreement, that false deal, President Trump's not going to be sending pallets of laundered cash in unmarked airplanes in the middle of the night to the Ayatollahs, and they understand that. And furthermore, President Trump is putting that pressure on the Europeans who would more than happily love to do business with Iran. So Iran is finding itself isolated. And one of the key things we need to do is, as you keep the pressure on Russia, that affects Iran. As you keep the pressure on China, that affects North Korea. And that is the grand strategic perspective that people need to look at this wholeheartedly. You know, right now, Iran needs to have Russia in the Middle East. That's their godfather. And if Russia is not there to help them, Iran is all by itself, and it's going to collapse. And the Saudis want to see Iran collapse as well. So I just think that this is a dying breath of a regime that has pretty much overrun its course.
I'm not a big fan of doing foreign policy over Twitter, but
me either.
In response, and listen, I get it. It's his shtick. It's what he does, and you know, I certainly don't think he says anything he doesn't plan on backing up. But the fact of the matter is, I'm sure you've been in a lot of situations where, and I believe him, you don't talk yourself into a position of retaliation or recourse unless you're ready to go. And his response was, never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. Now listen, I know what he's trying to say there, but the world takes it a different way, much like Americans take what he says in two different breaths. The fact of the matter is, you've just said that the next time you threaten us, you will suffer like no one's ever suffered before. Whether you meant it that way or not, this is not a situation that you can idly chat about. This is the Obama red line in my mind. And listen, we can give them a hurting like no one's ever suffered before. We know we can do that. But you know probably as well as anybody I've ever met that foreign policy and decisions are not one of them is done exclusively to itself or in a silo. Everything affects everything. These discussions with Putin, I guarantee you, and I'm sure you know, that the Middle East was a significant topic in these discussions because we have different interests. Iran and Russia are on the same side. And I don't know that they hold each other to the NATO defensive principle, you know, that whole Montenegro gets attacked, hey, we're obligated to defend them because we're a member of NATO. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that my president just said something that puts us on the line for potential significant military strike.
Well, the thing with Russia, they have overextended themselves because, again, remember, they have a struggling economy. Right. Here, where I live in Texas, the Texas economy is better than the Russian GDP growth. So, you know, their involvement in Syria, their involvement in the Ukraine, they're rattling their sabers, you know, threatening the Baltic states. They really can overextend themselves to come to Iran's aid. But what I think is so important to understand is that, you know, Iran has always been at war with the United States of America since 1983 with the Beirut barracks bombing, which was done by Hezbollah, which is sponsored by Iran even till today. And when you look at 18 to 20% of the casualties and deaths that were suffered by our men and women in uniform in Iraq especially, and some in Afghanistan, it's because of the explosive force penetrator, IED, that was developed in Iran, and they gave it to the terrorists there. So there is without a doubt plenty of cause for us to take an action against Iran. But, you know, I would think that, first of all, we want to do this economically. We want to do it diplomatically to continue to isolate them. And maybe we support, you know, others to be able to take up that cause, like the Saudis. Maybe the Kurds can also have a buttress against Iranian expansion and what we see happening in Syria. I know that the Israelis would love to be able to, you know, have the reins taken off of them and go after the Iranians. So there are many different aspects of how we can, you know, peel the onion back when it comes to Iran. But again, I just think that you see someone with Hassan Rouhani and the Ayatollahs there, they're on their dying breath, and they're just trying to, you know, throw out whatever type of empty threats they can, but it's not going to be too much longer. And wouldn't it be a great thing that all of a sudden we see the collapse of the rule of the Ayatollahs, which was brought into being because of the weakness of Jimmy Carter and sustained, you know, through the weakness of Barack Obama?
which is a great segue, because liberals are the only people on the planet, to me, as delusional as the leadership in Iran. They've actually taken the platform that if we abolish ICE, somehow people are going to be better off, American citizens. They took it so far as to announce and introduce legislation on their own that they then voted down, which, again, is another discussion altogether. But I look at what's going on in the Middle East and the fact that, and I know you know this, there is a lot of unaccounted for dirty material traveling around the world, and terrorists are intent on getting their hands on it. I think that their dream would be to suitcase nuke downtown New York. And to prevent that, we need borders. You can't be a sovereign nation without borders. I mean, it's just that simple. But the left is riding this Ocasio-Cortez and a bunch of others are riding this abolish ICE movement, knowing full well that only 1 in 4 Americans actually supports it, which, by the way, I'm surprised it's 1 in 4. But how do we get better national security, better regional security with a policy that will remove the law enforcement agency bent on protecting our borders? I don't understand the logic, or there is no logic. But how is that a thing for them now?
It's just a thing as part of their deranged, demented, and delusional philosophy of governance. You are looking at people that don't believe in the sovereignty of the United States of America, Curt. That's clear to understand. Only 18 Democrats last Wednesday night voted to support ICE. 34 flat out voted against a resolution to support ICE. 133 Democrats voted present. In other words, they didn't even have the courage to say that they wanted to see ICE. Yeah. Keith Ellison, who is the deputy director of the Democrat National Committee, a representative from Minnesota, and running to be the attorney general of Minnesota, last week said borders are an injustice. You're right. You have Ocasio-Cortez running around all over the country through the Midwest with Bernie Sanders talking about how we need to occupy ICE. These are people that don't believe that we should have protections of American citizens. And you can just go back and look over the last 2 or 3 weeks, some of the things that ICE has done and, getting criminal illegal immigrants off the streets. I want the left to continue to say these delusional things. I want them to continue to go out all over the country and talk about socialism, because the American people are not on board with that. And you're right, 25%, 1 in 4. But, it's what the drill sergeant would say, some people just stuck on stupid, and you can't fix stupid. All you can do is keep it from spreading.
That's exactly right. Hey, I want one last thing I'd like to get your take on. I don't know how much you've read about the stuff that came out this past couple days on the investigation, the Mueller investigation, but it turns out that the FISA warrant was exactly what we thought it was, which was a made-up hoax, and how there's not felony crimes attached to what they did with this, which is completely lie and misrepresent to the judge how it came to be. But it basically proves everything that Trump has been saying since the first day this all started, which was this was a made-up hoax, and it turns out it actually was.
Well, hat tip to Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch, because it is amazing to me how they are able to do things that our, congressional and senatorial, oversight committees aren't able to do. But just think about the fact that James Clapper, I think it was yesterday on CNN, pretty much so admitted that this whole intelligence community endeavor was ordered by President Obama. So we have a corruption that was part of the Obama administration that still exists today in the FBI and the overall Department of Justice. And the American people are starting to understand that. And what's even worse is that the American people are starting to see the weaponizing of the federal government agencies against them and against, our democracy and against everything that we stand for. We remember what happened with the IRS, and now we see, what is happening with in the Department of Justice, in the higher echelons of the FBI. The Peter Strzok testimony, the public hearing testimony, we saw the arrogance of the quote-unquote deep state, up front and personal. And that is unnerving and disconcerting to the American people. So, again, I think that as long as the Democrats want to have this Mueller investigation, this thing going on, that really does support constitutional conservatives, President Trump, and no one is going to want to see Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, or the guy Cohen, who was out there wanting to give a Purple Heart Award to Peter Strzok. Nobody wants to see those folks in a majority position in the House of Representatives, and definitely not in the Senate. So again, these guys are creating their own great commercial advertisements against themselves.
It's all unraveling very quickly. And I got to tell you, it's way off of out in left field, but the stuff coming out of Hollywood in the last 96 hours around pedophilia and the quote-unquote humor is so far beyond repulsive to me. And this is the epicenter of the liberal world is Hollywood and New York City. And the things that are coming out about these people is so far beyond disgusting to me. And Senator Cruz said something about the fact that if any of that stuff is true, that gentleman should be arrested. But we're going to see, and we're already seeing, liberals are defending a man who had a video and a tweet about raping a baby. In some way that was supposed to be some sort of, it's gross. It's beyond gross. And all of this stuff is coming out. They are who we thought they were. And, once again, they continue to be the very thing they profess to hate. And it's ridiculous.
Look at Michelle Wolf. When she came out during our Independence Day celebration, and she had Happy Abortion Day, and then she comes back in this thing about making ICE out to be ISIS. This recent Netflix thing. They are who we have always thought that they were to be, and now they are openly professing it. And I even wrote a piece on my website, theoldschoolpatriot.com. That talked about a German medical student who is trying to mainstream pedophilia. And if those thoughts get out there, it's just a matter of time because there are no boundaries, there are no limits to the craziness of the left.
Everything about them has become so anti-American and so contrary to the ideals and the faith this country was founded on. There's no coming back, and I like that in that. I like knowing who they are, but I worry that there are more people in that movement than any rational human being would think there would be.
God's in control. But the important thing, Kurt, is that we have to do better in our systems of education, which are now becoming systems of indoctrination. We've got to get back into middle school, high schools, college and university campuses, and we got to push back there. And what I love is that there is a growing movement of young, high school and college, constitutional conservatives, and they see this, and they don't want to be a part of it. We just got to give them a voice.
Yep. Hey, Colonel, thank you so much. God bless you. Take care of yourself.
God be with you.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125. We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is Breitbart's own Matthew Boyle. As I sit here on the first Monday after we publicly were told what we privately have known for almost 2 years, which is the entire thing was rigged. From day one, the FISA application, the FISA warrant, and all of the energy put behind it. I was wondering if you could kind of give the folks listening kind of a FISA explanation for dummies kind of a thing. We now know all of the things Trump has been claiming were true. This was a fake. This was a phony. This was done to rig an election. And not only that, but who's going to pay for this? Because this is not a mistake. These are crimes.
Yeah, well, look, basically what we find out is that they to get a warrant to surveil phone calls of a Trump advisor, Carter Page, they literally used fabricated evidence, right? Like they used the dossier that they created,
knowing it was fabricated,
right? They withheld information from the judge in the FISA court about how they created the fabricated evidence that they used to try to get the warrant. And then again, the first go around, it wasn't approved, right? Like, it was later that they came back to the FISA court right before the election to get it approved. Then, by the way, these things are signed off on, like personally signed by people like as high ranking as like Comey and Rosenstein and, you know, that high level of person. So that's the thing that's really troubling about this, is that people like that are the ones that signed these warrants. Or signed these applications to the FISA court to get the warrants. It's really troubling, the information that we've seen come out about this. And then also, we've also seen a lot of different pieces of information, and obviously this new document yet again confirms that our reporting on this has been right all along, that the FBI and the CIA appear to have put spies inside, and they'll call them informants, but I call them what they are. They're spies inside Donald Trump's presidential campaign, right? And the reason why I call them spies is because if they were informants, wouldn't they tell President Trump that they were doing it?
They were doing
if they
exactly
were
what
informants,
spies do.
he would be in the loop on it. They didn't tell him they were doing this.
Right. Because they were spying on him. I mean, it's that
exactly, and they were reporting back to the mothership, right? They were reporting back to the head Justice Department officials, who were then going and reporting back to the White House, who were then going and reporting to the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democrat National Committee as to the progress and the status of their efforts to steal the election in 2016. So you want to talk about interfering in an election? Let's start investigating Hillary Clinton and the Democrat National Committee, Loretta Lynch, James Comey, and Eric Holder, and all these other characters, and Barack Obama, and John Brennan, and the list goes on. But the fact of the matter is that all of them deserve to be under as much scrutiny as Trump has been over the last year and a half. All this evidence that keeps coming out keeps exonerating President Trump. They can't find anything wrong with what he did because he didn't do anything wrong, at least as far as I can tell. And I've been watching this very closely, and I was watching it very closely during the campaign. I don't think President Trump did anything wrong. I do, however, believe that the Obama Justice Department was the most corrupt in American history. This is going to make Watergate pale in comparison. They attempted to use the Justice Department to steal a presidential election, and they failed, and they were caught red-handed. It blew up in their face, and now the truth is coming out.
What does that mean? Does that mean anything to you? I mean, this can't be well, we caught him, and let's move on to the next problem. Somebody's going to have to pay. Are they not?
There should be a special counsel investigation to investigate all of this. So as soon as Mueller wraps his probe, I wish they would just appoint a second special counsel right now. But, I don't know if that's going to happen. But I do think that when Mueller wraps his probe, which I would imagine that it's coming to an end soon. I mean, eventually here it has to end. Mueller's probe is just continuing to drag on, and they're not getting anything and going anywhere with it. They haven't delivered anything. The only charges they've brought against different people that are Americans, might I add, because they charge all these, whimsical Russians, right? Like, well, okay, first off, none of them are ever going to see the inside of a U.S. courtroom, so it's all useless. But also, none of them worked with Americans, and Russians do this every year in every country and every election around the globe, right? They try to interfere. It's nothing new, nothing normal. And again, Mueller's team and Rosenstein have said over and over again, there's no connection between those Russians who have been indicted and U.S., and there's no U.S. people that colluded with them. But the fact of the matter is, the only U.S. people that he's gone after, like Paul Manafort, are on issues unrelated to the whole Russia probe, right? Like, and look, Manafort may or may not be a good guy. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at his record, there's some stuff that's probably worth probing there. And maybe there's a justified reason for him to be where he is.
Matt, if that's
but the fact
criteria.
of the matter is that it's not Mueller's lane, right? Like, that doesn't have anything to do with the special counsel investigation. The same stuff with Mike Flynn. So, I mean, until Mueller either Mueller needs to put up or shut up, right? Like, his mandate is running to, he's running the tape here. He's getting to the end of the line. He's running out of room.
Matt, I heard Trey Gowdy 3, 4, 5 months ago say that he had interviewed all 77 witnesses and he had not heard one word, one sentence, one syllable, anything from any witness anywhere that connected President Trump to anything resembling a crime, number one, and collusion, number two.
And that's the point.
It still goes on.
Mueller's interviewed those same people and probably more and hasn't found anything. Right? So, eventually he's going to have to say that. Right? He's going to have to say, okay, in some kind of a report, that's fine. He doesn't have to do a press conference. If Mueller doesn't seem to
this
like
is
to
going to be the mother of all
public.
press conferences, Matt. There's no way that this press conference that Mueller will have at the end of this, that there won't be some sort of action item, if not more than one, coming out of it. Because, the tens to hundreds of millions of dollars that has been spent on this investigation is going to hang somebody. I know they want it to be Trump, but they would have to make shit up at this point because now we know everything that led them to this investigation was a lie. Well, they committed crimes to try and make someone look like they committed a crime. And that's going to, we're seeing that now. And I don't know. By
the way, the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are particularly revealing. And they're a key part of this whole picture, right? Because what they do is they show us, those text messages show us their intent, right? So they were talking first about how they would stop Trump from winning. And then if he did win, that what their investigations into all this crazy stuff would create an insurance policy, which is exactly what they've used it for, right? Since Trump won the election, because they all failed to stop him in the plot in 2016, the Hillary plot, we'll call it the Hillary-Russia plot or whatever you want to call it. But the point is that they failed. Spygate failed in 2016. So they went to their backup plan, which is their insurance policy, which is what Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were talking about, which was to put Trump's presidency in check. Imagine if Trump didn't have the Mueller investigation going on right now for the last year and a half, for the first 2 years of his presidency. He'd be the most popular president in American history. Despite all of this crazy media stuff over the last week, he hit his highest approval rating ever, according to the Wall Street Journal and the NBC News and their latest poll, 45% approval. He'd be at 65% if it wasn't for the Mueller probe.
Well, we'd never have another
because
Democratic
what he's doing
president.
is extraordinarily popular. People support him. They support his policies. The only thing that's holding him back is this stupid stuff that Mueller is Peter Strzok's insurance policy against President Trump, and Mueller's going to have to answer for that eventually. And remember, Peter Strzok worked for Mueller.
He tried to I was almost as offended by Peter Strzok as I have been by people like Elizabeth Warren. He sat there and tried to act as if he was towing some sort of line of moral perfection when he said, yes, I tweeted, I texted that, but that in no way, shape, or form biased my job. I can't. It's so embarrassing. I can't even repeat. It's insane. So. And I'm with you. I think if this Mueller, they would have created something else, right? Because this has been 18 months of creating one problem after another. This is none of this. It's Stormy Daniels. It's North Korea. It's the world's ending. It's ICE. And they go on to the next one. When they stop being able to raise money and get votes off of something, they move to the next topic because they really don't care. They don't care about blacks. They've never cared about blacks. They don't care about Black Lives Matter because it's not getting them votes anymore. And the fact of the matter is,
they don't care about any of the actual policy outcomes, which is why you're seeing this rebellion on the left, right? Why do you think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is defeating somebody like Joe Crowley?
Well, hold on. Let me mention something to that effect, Matt. We've heard in the last 48 hours, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that the unemployment rate is low because people are working 2 jobs. And then Elizabeth Warren came out and said it's because people are working 2, 3, or 4 jobs. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics just put out a study that said 95% of Americans work 1 job. 5% of Americans work more than 1 job. So
it's lies.
So those are. But see, Matt, here's my thing though. Matt, what they both said is not just a mistake, and it's a flat out lie.
Yeah.
It's a flat out lie.
And they know it too.
Right.
And they
No,
know it too,
exactly.
but
They know their
reason
line when they
why-
say it.
But hold on, Kurt. The reason why the leftist voters out there, the public, are voting for people that are willing to lie like that to push a socialist agenda, the socialist agenda of Ocasio-Cortez and Elizabeth Warren, the reason why is because the Democrat Party establishment, the Nancy Pelosi's and the Steny Hoyers and the Chuck Schumers and Dick Durbins of the world, aren't delivering on their policy outcomes that the left and the Democrats want. They aren't doing the bidding of Black Lives Matter. They aren't doing the bidding of the abolish ICE community, at least not yet, right? Look at what happened on the floor of the House last week when there was a vote called on abolish ICE. The Democrats split three ways. 18 of them voted to protect ICE, 34 of them voted to abolish ICE, and 133 of them voted present. 133 voted present at the urging of Nancy Pelosi, by the way.
They just beat down legislation that they proposed. I mean, and somehow the idiots that follow them don't get it, or they just don't want to get it. And I guess that's the most frustrating part, is that you would think, given facts and data and truth in front of you when you're starting to assess everybody works two jobs. Well, no, 95% of people don't work two jobs. You would think at some point the people on the left would get so tired of being wrong and so tired of following people who hate this country that they would say, wait a minute. And I believe that's part of why we're seeing the walk-away movement.
Yeah, look, and by the way, the left is freaked out about walk-away, right? Like, did you see David Hogg's Twitter last night? He's the Parkland kid who's kind of organized all these leftist gun control rallies for them. He tweeted like 8 times in one tweet as he says the same thing over and over again. Walk away is Russian propaganda. Walk away is Russian propaganda. Well, I mean, by the way, what's their evidence for that? They're citing a CNN story, which, by the way, CNN,
I've got video that says otherwise.
a CNN story saying that Russian bots are pushing the whole thing. Okay, Russian bots push all sorts of things, right? So, I mean, I could argue that Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign was Russian propaganda, but and 90% of the product that the Democrat National Committee puts out, the Russians try to stir chaos in the United States. That's normal. But the fact of the matter is the walk-away movement is 100% real. It's not Russian propaganda.
Well,
it's very real, and the left is terrified of it.
You can Russian bot the hell out of Twitter, but Russian bots don't make those videos. They don't, there's videos all over YouTube now, although it's funny how hard YouTube is trying to suppress them. And it is all the things you would expect a rational adult to say, which is, hey, listen, I started to look back on my party and see all the things that they said were in direct opposition to the things that they did. They were the hateful, spiteful, mean, intolerant, perverted scumbags that they were professing to hate. That was who they are. That was the party of I belong, and they're leaving. And it's I got to tell you, it's empowering. It's exciting to see it. But here's the thing, and I'll finish up with this, Matt. The rubber's going to meet the road soon. The left is going to push every button it can until it runs out of buttons to push. I worry about the safety of my president because I think once they run out of rabbit holes to go down, the only thing left is just outright confrontation. And you saw yesterday, I think, I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but the video from Shiva Ayadari, the gentleman running against Elizabeth Warren up here, was assaulted by a Warren supporter who was a white supremacist. And you just can't make this stuff up. But at some point soon, we are going to have a confrontation, and it's going to be a bunch of gutless cowards who've never stood for anything against a couple million law-abiding, Second Amendment-loving citizens who will defend their body and their property. And I can tell you right now, it's not going to end well for them, but it's not going to be good for the country.
Yeah, look, the best way for this to go is, I think, if people elect Republicans in November, and I think the Democrats will break if Republicans hold the House in November and add a bunch of seats in the Senate. I don't think there's much place for the Democrats to go strategically, and I think they make a move to surrender at that point in this battle.
I got to tell you, I believe Newt Gingrich.
That's what has to happen.
Yeah, I believe when Newt Gingrich says, I think he's probably one of the smartest political minds of our lives. I believe when he says he thinks we're going to pick up 4 to 6 seats, I believe him. And at that point, all bets are off because we will have Kavanaugh, when he gets confirmed, is going to go nuts because I know there was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a magazine restriction law that's going to find its way to the Supreme Court. And the fact of the matter is when that happens, the Supreme Court's going to rule in favor of the Second Amendment, and liberals are going to be even more apoplectic, which, by the way, I know I got to close it out, but I know you heard last night about the shooting in Canada, a country where you have to go through about 47,000 different hoops to get a gun. It was a handgun, and the handgun fired 27 rounds and hit 14 people. God bless those people, the people that survived. But the fact of the matter is laws don't stop criminals from getting firearms. They just stop law-abiding citizens from defending themselves. So, Matt, thank you. Always a pleasure, buddy.
Yep, thanks, Curt.
Winners and losers today. And let me just first off say, absolutely, every listener to this show that knows me and is a fan of mine, I'm a fan of theirs. Our thoughts and prayers to those families touched by the shooting in Toronto. Once again, proving that gun laws don't keep law-abiding citizens safe. They just allow criminals access to defenseless citizens. Anyway, my loser today is a simple. He's been on my list a bunch of times. He's never actually gotten the top spot till today. Lindsey Graham has turned into a clown, and he's a clown show. I'm so tired of him portraying himself as a conservative and just end up being full of shit. And having been around him on the McCain bus during the elections and listening to him talk, he is a swamp man through and through. His voting conscience is directly tied to his ability to raise money. It's just sickening. I'm tired of him. He repulses me, and I'm embarrassed because he could be in a position to do so much good. That's my loser. My winner today is I'm going to start with Sarah Carter, and everybody below and around Sarah Carter who has worked their asses off against a ton of personal opposition to expose what we now know was a completely fraudulent document. The FISA application and the process by which it was submitted, there were multiple felonies committed in the construction of the document, the submission of the document, and everybody associated with it. You want to talk about high treason? That's exactly what high treason looks like. They conspired to rig a presidential election. We now know that for a fact. We just have to find out the names. That's what I'm looking for. So, Sarah, God bless you. Great work and keep it going. That's it for today. Great show. Thanks again to Colonel West, who is one of my favorite people of all time. Tomorrow, Cam Edwards of NRA Radio will join me. Lots to discuss around our Second Amendment, guys. Lots going on and lots to talk about as we talk. We'll go back over. We'll have more from Toronto and this mass shooting. And there's some video online. So, guys, and I keep saying this, you don't have to own a firearm if you choose not to. But I can't implore you, and we'll talk to you about this tomorrow, I can't implore you enough to at least go take a firearm safety course. If you're a parent of young kids, please do the same. Teach your kids respect of firearms, even if you don't own one, because you never know when they're going to be around one. God bless you guys. Thank you. Cam Edwards tomorrow. Thanks again to Colonel West, one of my favorite people in the world and our next president. And Matt Boyle, you guys have a great day. God bless. Catch you up tomorrow.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson, Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.